I'm Rosie Moody, Head of Digital Transformation at the University of Westminster. I'm 5'5", brown curly hair, glasses, in a blue and black dinosaur dress.
And it's a beautiful dress. Hi everyone, I'm Carly Brown, so I'm a consultant at Strengthify, and as I mentioned yesterday, my background's in psychology, so that's really what I'm bringing to the work. And I'm wearing a green and white dress at 5'7", a few more grey hairs than I would like, but curly hair.
So we're here to talk to you about strengths and what we at the University of Westminster have done with strengths, with Strengthify. You're going to hear the word strengths a lot. I'm just sort of putting that out there now. So just to explain what life was like before we started our strengths approach, we very much had a culture of focusing on underperformance rather than helping those who were performing well. Our teams worked in silos, very little collaboration across teams. Where there was frustration. People didn't necessarily talk about what their approaches or styles were, and most people were at loggerheads when they were trying to work together. We had disengagement, demotivated colleagues. Generally, people weren't very happy. We had inconsistent approaches to line management and development, and our PDR cycle was just a tick box exercise, which I'm sure no one in the room can relate to. And we, as I'm sure all of you do, had significant operational demands, which all of those things meant we were really struggling to deal with.
So Strengthify partnered with University of Westminster. I'm just going to step away from those microphones and there'll be a bit of feedback. So we partnered with University of Westminster to implement what we call a strengths-based approach, and this also is linked to the appreciative inquiry that some of you might have come across, which is a way of approaching change and transformation that, as you can see in the image there, is based on looking at what we have, what's strong, what we can leverage, what things we've got that are going in our favour that we can really try and maximise, instead of only focusing over here. So it's not to say that we don't look at problems or deficits or what's weak and how you might use that, but it is about, can we understand what assets we've got in the team as individuals, but also within the organisation, perhaps to tackle some of the challenging things that we've got going on. As this is a short presentation slot, we've got a video to show you, so I'm going to give you a really brief outline of why this works in terms of the theory and the evidence behind it. So strength psychology and appreciative inquiry comes from positive psychology, which is the scientific study of when we are flourishing, when we are doing brilliantly, when we are most engaged, most happy, for example, what's at play there. And what you tend to find when you look into that is it's different factors than you would find if you were looking at when we're most unhappy, when we're most disengaged. They're not necessarily polar opposites of each other. So this is a study of what's going on when we're doing brilliantly, and there's lots and lots of research that comes in there. It's also based on the jobs, demands, resources model. When you talk about teams and how we can elevate teams into feeling really good, we know that it's perfectly possible for people to thrive in roles that are really demanding, or in organisations where we've got immense challenges, like lots of universities at the minute. Perfectly possible to still thrive there as long as there are sufficient resources at play. We mean physical resources, but also mental resources, feeling good about your work, having work that plays into what you like doing, that is engaging to you, where you feel valued, and things like that. And finally, one of the most fascinating theories for me around this is called the broaden and build theory. If you haven't come across it before, I really encourage you to look it up, or perhaps come to one of our longer workshops where we go into a bit more detail. But essentially what this work has found time and time again is that when somebody is feeling positive, as opposed to when they are feeling neutral or negative, their brain literally works in different ways. They are able to access different thoughts and feelings in those moments than they would be if they were feeling neutral or negative. So what we see is that when doctors, for example, are feeling more positive, they are able to integrate information about patients faster, they get to the diagnosis area faster, for example. And there's lots and lots of things that play out in organisations when people are feeling good that you just don't get at the same levels when you're feeling neutral or negative. So job performance goes up, we are more productive, we have access to different innovative thoughts, for example. We are more trusting, and we build trusting relationships faster with people. We're able to perspective take more, and we set tougher goals for ourselves, and all of the things that you can see on the screen there. So there's an abundance of evidence that suggests that this really can work. And in terms of outcomes that you can expect when you actually get people to understand what their innate strengths are and what the strengths are in a team and how you can use those, how you can start to do a bit more work that plays into the things that you naturally find engaging. There's lots of different outcomes that have come from meta-analyses and randomised control trials. We know that people feel much more engaged. So lots of organisations, we understand that we want people to feel engaged and feel good at work, but how we actually operationalise that is quite challenging to understand. So strengths is a really good way of doing that. Colleagues more likely to say that they have a great quality of life. We spend a lot of time in the workplace, so something that's really important to me. Performance goes up, turnover goes down, all of the things that you would expect. So some really good outcomes that can help us, especially when we're trying to navigate challenges.
So to tell you a bit more, here's a familiar face or two. Keep clicking.
Keep clicking.
Keep clicking.
Okay, we've got a video to show you now. That's the third click. One more?
Okay, no. Oh,
No,
too far.
not one more.
One less.
Thank you.
Nothing like an IT conference.
Clicking, not a strength, really. Let's step out here for a second.
Our biggest challenge was that we weren't really a team. We had a lot of people doing a lot of distinct roles. There was some overlap between them, but there was no common framework for people to talk about.
We would periodically meet as a team and talk about what we were doing well, what we could improve on, but we never really got down to exploring the unique contributions we each made to that.
We didn't really have an approach to how we worked together, how we managed people. We did a lot of performance management if someone wasn't performing, but there was no helping someone to develop if they were doing well. It was very much sort of let that person be and focus more on the negatives.
A desire to understand my team better so that we can work together in a more effective way. It was important to really understand people and to be alongside my team.
To try and find a way to get all my team members, for whatever the project may be, much more efficient with their communication.
We started off with conversations about how we might be able to use strength, understand a bit better about how it might fit within our organisation. We then went on discovery workshops, so we each learnt about our own individual strengths and how we might use those. And that really started with Andy and I and some other people within the team who registered an interest in wanting to learn more about themselves. We then did the management development programme and thought really this is something we do want to spread within the team and within the department. So we sent people on those discovery workshops and on the management development programme where that was relevant to their role. And then after that we have done workshops within the team, so in each of our team meetings we're talking about strengths, we're talking about how we embed it. So it's been a real journey.
An incremental journey, building for me a self-awareness. And I think for others in the team, it was also about the opportunity to share those insights together and sort of grow together. Some of us went on the management development programme, which was a good way of then consolidating that and actually practically and theoretically looking at the basis for a strengths approach.
How simple the adoption was around like day-to-day job. It was quite easy. First doing the Clifton assessment. And then following that up with the Strengthify workshops to really drill down what that actually meant and how I can use it.
We've done a lot of assessments previously as an organisation that have put us in boxes or have tried to treat everyone the same, and I think the difference with this assessment is that everyone comes out with a different outcome. It's treating you as a unique individual with your own strengths profile, and I think that's really powerful. We've got a common thread where everyone's got an understanding of their own strengths and of each other's strengths, and that's really helped us to work together better and to collaborate more.
Since adopting it all, there's a much more openness within our team. We're much more positive, our communication is much higher, and we're using each other's strengths to boost our own workflows and our own way of working.
To build a greater sense of accountability together for what we do as a PMO team, so the fact that we are all involved in changes within the organisation through projects we're involved in, and how we bring our strengths to bear on that. I think it's resulted in a more positive mindset, perhaps a greater energy and sense of getting into the flow of what we do, because we're deploying our strengths better and we're having conversations about that. Trust has developed through this because we've been able to both understand more about each other's strengths, but to validate those through feedback and recognising those things in one another has been a positive.
People are more confident. The mindset across the team has changed. I think everyone's just really embracing this opportunity to think about things in a positive light rather than the traditional focus on negatives and how you improve the things you're not good at.
Areas like understanding our roles better and how our strengths play into those roles, the relevance of our strengths in terms of the competencies, the behaviours we need to do our jobs well.
We've got the team grid, which shows all of the team's strengths, and the team have actually been really interested in having that available as a tool to reference quite frequently, so that we can see someone's strong in one area, someone's stronger in another area, where we've got collective strengths, or where we've got perhaps one person who's good at something that not everyone else is, and really celebrate that rather than treat them in any way differently because of it.
I think it helps a lot with diversity because there's no negativity or boundary being put on people. It's all about positivity, it's all about your strengths, and everyone is different. And most projects always need a strength of some sort. So it's allowing people to input a lot more instead of having to sit back because they don't feel they have anything to input. I'm just trying to make a conscious effort to apply the strengths first. So every team meeting, every communication I have with team members, instead of just ringing them or getting in contact, I'm consciously thinking, what are their strengths? What are mine? How can I relate those strengths together to get a much more productive output?
Everyone really has the confidence to be able to use their strengths in their day-to-day job, but also outside.
We will be more resilient when we're under pressure because we have a more self-awareness. We're more able to be supporting each other in those situations.
I'm quite looking forward to apply the strengths not only within our department but wider across all colleagues within the university, especially when we're getting kind of more business engagement or stakeholder engagement. We'll be able to kind of put that within our projects in a much more efficient manner.
We're going to look to spread that further, so people outside of my team who are interested, we're going to put through that same journey, make sure that they're fully on board with strengths, and then anyone that's interested, until we've created an avalanche of interest and then everyone wants to do it.
Definitely try to implement it in every way possible. Even the smallest ways can really give a huge impact.
It's good to travel this journey with a professional partner who understands and has experience of working through that and taking that forward, and that's been very valuable for us.
So in reality, obviously, nice promo video, it hasn't all been completely plain sailing. I have some cynics in my team, let's call them that. But in general, conversations are now covering working style and practices. At the start of projects, we have a conversation about what are our strengths, how can we work together better. We have tied our PDRs to strengths this year. It has become a much more useful exercise rather than that HR says you have to do a PDR. Rather than that, oh God, it's really annoying to work with that colleague, I have actually heard some people in my team say, I wonder what their strengths are, which is such a difference. As I said, project teams are reflecting on their strengths, and they're also incorporating that into sprint retros, so they're looking at how they work together as well as how they might work together in future. We have got improved cross-team collaboration, and generally we've got better individual motivation and a more positive outlook. Not for everybody, but for those who have embraced it, it's definitely there. And I just want to give you this quote. So one of my team put this in their PDR this year. I've been very fortunate in the last 12 months at Westminster. While I believe I have added value to my department and worked hard to bring success to a significant project, I've been offered the opportunity to develop and use my strengths. For the first time in many years, I feel that my managers understand my value to the organisation and where I can bring my unique talents to make a difference. This has changed my mental health considerably. I am very grateful. And I think that's just a really good testament to actually how important it is to think about things in a positive light, to focus on where you can work to your strengths. And, you know, when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And immediately sent it off to a bunch of people like, look, this is the power of strengths. So, yeah, there we are.
Thanks for sharing that, Rosie. So just some tips. We've got 26 seconds left, so I'll go fast. But if you were considering doing something similar, I just want to say this is not about an assessment or trying to sell any kind of assessment. That's a tiny part of the process about helping people to understand what they're bringing to the table. But it is about a way of working, as Rosie's kind of articulated very nicely there. So if you were interested in getting started, we would recommend, first of all, have a conversation with a couple of colleagues about what's interesting you about this. Are they interested in thinking about thriving at work, or thinking about some of the assets and strengths that you've got, perhaps if you're making changes, and having to think about whether this could be an approach that works for you. If you're going to start getting on that journey, you do need to have a way of identifying what strengths people have got, and you can do that with something like a psychometric assessment. You don't have to use those. There's different options for different budgets and options if you have no budget, quite frankly. But it is about giving people an avenue to explore and really reflect on, when am I at my very best? When am I most engaged? When do I do brilliant work? When do I get my most innovative ideas? Okay, how do we start to maximise a little bit more of that into the way we work? If you're going to implement a strengths-based approach, your line managers will have a real pivotal part in that. There is extensive evidence that managers are linked to 70% of the variance in the way that your colleagues will be feeling. That the manager has a huge play in that, and if you are a manager, you will know it's extremely hard to keep people motivated with lots of difficult things. So we support managers to think about how they would implement this as an approach. You'd then want to be thinking about the team and how you can bring strengths into the team, any small changes you can make to the way you're working. And again, Rosie's given some fantastic examples of that, that start to bring this into a way of working and a way of life, really. And finally, of course, you want to measure and celebrate and think about what impacts are we having? Is it having the desired effect? And if not, what can we pivot and change that would help it to do that? So thank you very much for listening. I've gone over by about 30 seconds. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great.
If we're allowed.
Thank you very much. Well,
Possibly, yeah.
quite right. So that's been very thought-provoking, not least the thought that I don't have enough dinosaur print in my life. We might have time for a couple of questions. It's tea and coffee afterwards, so does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Yes, gentleman over here. Sean, bring in the mic.
You talked a lot about strengths. Can you give us some examples of the types of strengths that you actually identified in people?
Yeah, absolutely. So different measurements would have different ones, but when we're looking on a personal level, we get people to think about things like, are they brilliant at influencing and persuading? And then how, how would that help with things like stakeholders that you're working with, colleagues that you're working with? We get people to think about the strengths that they might have in the way they execute things, the way they process information. And we've got tons of anecdotes, but we had a really interesting workshop real quickly where it was in Edinburgh and some colleagues were saying that they're quite strategic in their thinking, but actually that was being seen as a bad thing by certain colleagues or because they were processing information really fast, but it's an innate ability. And actually when you start to think about it in terms of an asset, there was brilliant things that they could do with that, and because they were having those conversations about their way of thinking, it was kind of really coming out with their colleagues about how they could do that. So there are different strengths, but I think the point that sits behind this for me is so what? Like what can you do with that? And that's why a strengths-based approach is quite different from other assessments which look at personality and things like that. They all have their place, but this is about what do you do with that? How can you maximize that? So yeah, different strengths that we can explore, but the value and impact that those create and how you can leverage them is the most important part, I think. Yeah.
Great, thank you. One more, if anybody's got one.
You mentioned in the video that you want to try and get interest elsewhere in strengths. Have you started to get that interest elsewhere?
Yes. And Holger was telling me, just hiding at the back of the room there rather than being up front, he has already had colleagues from my university completely outside of IT contact them and say we're interested in the discovery workshop and you know, coming through the process. So there's a lot of interest about working in a strengths approach at the moment. Everyone's too busy to do this, but actually this is the time you need to prioritise this work. You know, when everyone's struggling both financially and with the amount of workload, this makes a real difference. You know, this isn't let's buy a new IT system. This is let's fundamentally change the way that we approach work. So, yeah.
Just to add to that really quickly, if I can, what we tend to see with the universities that we're working with, that you get an interest from a small team or a small group of people, and that just grows. We would never recommend that you need to get all of the exec leadership on board, for example, first. You should be waiting a really long time. But actually, when you see the power of what it actually creates in place, that's when you start to get the rippling out effect, and people will go, yeah,
just to clarify, I did not ask permission to do this. I just did it, and now we've started, so we can't stop. So yeah, life advice.
Yeah.
Great, yeah, no, do and seek forgiveness later.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.